The orc girl had him on his back again before the sun cleared the birch line, and Rowan Lawson blinked up at the pale dawn sky, trying to remember which way his feet had gone. "You are telegraphing," Elara Ashford said above him, her knees pinning his shoulders, her tusks catching the early light. "Your weight shifts before you move." "I will try to be more subtle," he managed, breathless. Her hands were still braced against his chest. She smelled like pine soap and morning dew. She let him up after a moment, stepping back across the meadow grass. Water droplets clung to the wildflowers between them. Again. Rowan had arrived at the settlement 3 weeks earlier with a wagon of carpentry tools and a letter of introduction to the mill owner. The frontier town of Crest Hollow needed skilled hands, and he had grown tired of his old life in the southern provinces, where every conversation followed a script, and every introduction required 3 layers of formality. Here, at the edge of the mapped territories, people built their own futures. Or so he had believed. The mill owner, a weathered man named Garrett, had warned him on the first day. "Raiders come down from the hills when the moon is dark. Mostly they want livestock, but a man alone makes an easy target." He had looked Rowan over with the expression of someone appraising a plank for rot. "You know how to fight?" "Not particularly," Rowan had admitted. Garrett had grunted. "Talk to Elara. She keeps an eye on the new folk." Rowan had expected a town guardsman or perhaps a retired soldier. Instead, he found a young orc woman working the vegetable garden behind the trading post, her green skin bright against the dark earth, her build lean and quick like a deer. She had looked up when he approached, wiping dirt from her hands. "Garrett sent me," he had said. "He mentioned you might help me learn to defend myself." She had studied him for a long moment. Her eyes were amber sharp. "Dawn tomorrow, the meadow past the mill. Wear clothes you can move in." Now, 3 weeks later, he spent every dawn on his back in that meadow while Elara taught him what she called defensive techniques. Mostly, they involved her demonstrating how to take a man to the ground, and Rowan serving as the man. He had accumulated an impressive collection of bruises across his ribs, shoulders, and pride. "Your center is too high," she said, circling him. "If someone rushes you, they will use that. How do I lower it? Bend your knees. Spread your stance." She demonstrated, dropping into a crouch that made her look even more like something wild and alert. "Try to push me over." He hesitated. Elara stood perhaps 5.5 feet tall, built like a willow switch, all lean muscle and efficient movement. He stood just over 6 feet and outweighed her by a comfortable margin. Pushing her seemed both ungentlemanly and unlikely to succeed based on prior experience. "I will not break," she said, impatient. He stepped forward and placed his hands on her shoulders, applying gentle pressure. She did not budge. He pushed harder. She might have been rooted in the earth. He shifted his weight and tried to use leverage. Somehow his feet went out from under him and he landed hard on his tailbone, the impact rattling his teeth. Elara was kneeling over him before he could process the fall, her hands on his wrists, pinning them beside his head. "See, center." Her face was very close. He could see the faint freckles scattered across her nose, the way her dark hair had come loose from its tie. She was breathing hard, her chest rising and falling. For a moment neither of them moved, then she released him and stood, turning away. "That is enough for today." Rowan lay in the grass for a moment longer, watching her walk back toward the tree line. He had stopped minding the bruises somewhere around the end of the first week. The carpentry work was steady. Rowan spent his days at the mill or on site at various homesteads, replacing worn beams, building additions, crafting furniture. The settlement was growing, pushing gradually into the territory that had once been pure wilderness. People here worked hard and spoke plainly. He liked it. He liked the way they measured a man by what he could do rather than who his family was or how he phrased his sentences. But the mornings belonged to Elara. She never explained why she had agreed to train him, and he never asked. The arrangement seemed fragile, something that might dissolve if examined too closely. He simply showed up each dawn, and she was always there waiting. "Today we work on holds," she announced one morning, gesturing for him to sit on the ground. He sat. She dropped down behind him, wrapping one arm across his throat and the other around his chest. "If someone gets you like this, you have very little time. The blood to your head is cut off. You will pass out in seconds." Her arm was surprisingly strong, her body pressed against his back. He could feel her heartbeat. "What do I do?" he asked, trying to focus on the lesson. "Tuck your chin. It gives you a moment." Her breath was warm against his ear. "Then you drive your weight backwards, slam them to the ground if you can. Use your elbows." He tried to tuck his chin. Her arm tightened. "Good, now the backward fall. Are you ready?" He was not ready. He nodded anyway. She pulled him back and they tumbled together into the grass, rolling, and when they stopped he was on his back and she was lying across him, propped on her elbows, her face inches from his. Neither of them was quite breathing right. "That was good," she said quietly. "Thank you." They stayed like that for several heartbeats. Then she pushed up and offered him a hand. Over breakfast at the communal hall, Garrett sat down across from Rowan with a bowl of porridge and a knowing look. "How is the training?" "Educational," Rowan said carefully. "Elara is good people. Do not let the others bother you." "The others? You have not noticed the looks?" Garrett raised an eyebrow. "Human man, orc woman, spending every morning alone in a meadow, people talk." Rowan felt heat climb his neck. "We are just training." "Sure you are." Garrett grinned around his spoon. "Just mind you are serious about it if it is going to be more. She has had enough grief in her life without adding a scandal that goes nowhere." Rowan thought about that conversation through the rest of the day, his hands busy with a fence repair while his mind circled the same questions. What were his intentions? He had come to the frontier to start fresh, to build something with his own hands. Romance had not been part of the plan. But every morning he woke up thinking about the meadow, about Elara's quick smile when he finally managed to counter one of her moves, about the way she sometimes let her hand linger on his arm when she helped him up. That evening he walked past the trading post and saw her sitting on the steps, mending a leather strap. She looked up as he approached. "Is something wrong?" she asked. "No, I just wanted to talk." She set down the strap. "Sit." He sat beside her on the steps. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Around them the settlement was settling into evening, lamps being lit, doors closing, the sounds of dinner preparation. "Why did you agree to train me?" he asked. She was quiet for a moment. "You looked like you needed help." "That is all. Is there supposed to be more?" He looked at her profile, the strong line of her jaw, the way the fading light caught in her hair. "I am not certain, but I think I would like there to be." She turned to face him, her expression unreadable. "People already talk, Rowan. If we give them something real to talk about, it will get harder, for both of us, but especially for you. I do not care what people say. You might eventually. When they make it difficult for you to get work, or when they stop inviting you to gatherings, or when they look at you like you have done something wrong." "Have I?" "No." She reached out and took his hand, lacing her fingers through his. Her palm was calloused, warm. "But they will think you have." "Do you want there to be more?" he asked. She smiled, small and private. "I have been throwing you to the ground every morning for 3 weeks and you keep coming back. What do you think?" His heart did something complicated in his chest. "I think your pinning techniques are very thorough," she laughed, the sound bright and unexpected. "They are they not?" She squeezed his hand. "Dawn tomorrow. I would not miss it." The next morning she taught him how to escape a wrist grab, which involved a great deal of hand-holding and repositioning. The morning after that, she showed him ground defense, which meant she had him on his back in the grass while she explained leverage points and weight distribution. He noticed that she seemed to be inventing reasons to maintain contact, and he noticed that he was not trying very hard to escape anymore. "You are not even attempting to break free," she said, exasperated, pinning his wrists above his head. "I am trying," he lied. "You are not." But she was smiling. "Perhaps I need more demonstration." She leaned closer, her face serious except for the amusement in her eyes. "Perhaps you need to focus." "I am extremely focused." "On what?" "That would be inappropriate to say while you have me pinned." Her smile widened, showing the edges of her small tusks. "Try to escape, Rowan. Actually try." He tried. He twisted his wrists, attempted to buck her off, used his leg strength to shift their position. She countered every move, flowing like water, and ended with him on his stomach, her weight on his back, his arm locked behind him. "Better," she said, breathing hard. "You are learning." "Good. I would hate to think I was wasting your time." She released him and sat back on her heels. "You are not wasting my time." He rolled over to look up at her. Morning light surrounded her, turning her hair to fire at the edges. "What are we doing, Elara? Right now, we are training." "Is that all this is?" She looked at him for a long moment. "What do you want it to be?" "I want to take you to dinner. A real dinner in the hall where people can see us. I want to stop pretending this is only about fighting techniques. People will talk. Let them." She bit her lip, thinking. Then she nodded. "Dinner tomorrow, but we still train at dawn." "I expect nothing less." They went to dinner the next evening and sat together at one of the long tables in the communal hall. People did indeed talk, or rather they fell silent and stared. Rowan ignored them, focused on Elara as she told him about growing up in a mixed settlement further east, about coming to Crest Hollow 2 years ago looking for a place that needed an extra pair of hands. "Why here?" he asked. "It was far enough from where I had been. And Garrett did not ask stupid questions when I applied to work at the trading post. He just asked if I could count and lift heavy things." "Can you?" "Very well on both counts," she smiled. "Why did you come here?" "Same reason. It was far enough from where I had been. Running from something. From a life where everything was already decided. My father wanted me to take over his workshop in the city, marry the daughter of his business partner, produce grandchildren on a schedule. I wanted to decide things for myself." "Are you deciding things for yourself now?" He looked at her across the table, at the way the lamplight caught in her eyes. "I am trying to." Over the next 2 weeks, they fell into a new pattern. Mornings in the meadow, his back in the grass and her hands on his shoulders, both of them pretending the lessons were still entirely about self-defense. Evenings together, sometimes at dinner, sometimes walking the perimeter of the settlement, talking about everything and nothing. He learned that she loved thunderstorms and hated mushrooms and could identify every bird by its call. She learned that he had a sweet tooth, could not carry a tune, and had once built an entire barn single-handedly on a bet. "You built a barn alone?" she asked, skeptical. "It was a small barn." "More of a large shed, still." "I was trying to prove something, did you?" "I proved that building a barn alone is exhausting and inefficient," he grinned. "But yes, I proved it." She shook her head, amused. "You are strange." "I am determined." "That too." One morning, she taught him how to counter a tackle, which required her to rush him repeatedly while he attempted to sidestep or redirect her momentum. He failed the first 6 attempts, ending up on the ground each time. On the 7th, he managed to turn her rush into a spin that left them both standing, his arms around her waist, her back against his chest. "Good," she said, slightly breathless. "That was good." He did not let go. She did not ask him to. They stood there in the dawn light, the meadow quiet around them, her heartbeat visible in the pulse at her throat. "Elara," he said. She turned in his arms to face him. "Yes, I think I have stopped caring about the training." "Have you?" Her voice was soft. "I mean, I still want to learn. But that is not why I come here every morning." "Why do you come here?" "Because you are here." She reached up and touched his face, her palm rough and gentle against his cheek. "I have been throwing you to the ground for weeks just to have an excuse to touch you. I know. You know. Elara, you taught me 7 different pins in the first week. I am not a master tactician, but even I noticed the pattern." She laughed, embarrassed. "I was not very subtle. You were not, but I did not mind." He covered her hand with his. "I have not minded any of it." She kissed him then, quick and soft, and pulled back before he could respond. "We should finish the lesson." "Should we?" "Yes, because there actually are raiders in the hills, and I actually do want you to know how to defend yourself." "Is that the only reason?" She smiled. "It is the main reason. The pinning is just a benefit." They continued the training, but something had shifted. The pretense was gone. When she took him to the ground now, it was with a kind of playful intimacy, both of them aware that this was more than instruction. When he finally managed to reverse a hold and pin her instead, she looked up at him with such open delight that he forgot what he was supposed to do next. "You got me," she said. "I did." "Are you going to let me up?" "Not yet." She raised an eyebrow. "No, no, I want to remember this. The one time I actually won. It will not be the only time. You are getting better. I have a good teacher." She reached up and pulled him down into a kiss, longer this time, thorough. When they broke apart, they were both breathing hard. "We should stop training in the meadow," she said. "People are definitely talking now." "Where should we train instead?" "My cabin. It has a large front room." "That will definitely make people talk less." She grinned. "I did not say that was the goal anymore." They moved the training to her cabin, a small, sturdy structure on the eastern edge of the settlement. The front room was indeed large, furnished simply with a table, 2 chairs, and a fireplace. They pushed the furniture aside to make space for grappling practice. The first morning in the cabin, she taught him how to break a bear hug from behind. It required him to drop his weight, turn into her body, and use his hip for leverage. He succeeded on the 3rd attempt, and she went tumbling onto the floor with him landing half on top of her. "Excellent," she said from beneath him. "Thank you. You can get off me now." "Can I?" She wrapped her arms around his neck. "Or you could stay there." He stayed. Autumn was turning the leaves gold when Rowan realized he had been at Crest Hollow for 2 months and could not imagine being anywhere else. The carpentry work remained steady. The people had accepted him despite his unorthodox relationship. And every morning he woke up knowing he would spend the dawn with Elara, learning to fight or maybe just finding excuses to hold each other on her cabin floor. But Garrett's warnings had not been empty concerns. The raiders did exist, and as the weather cooled and the harvest came in, their presence increased. Livestock went missing from outlying farms. A storage shed was broken into, dried goods stolen. The settlement organized watch rotations, and Rowan found himself paired with Elara for a night shift, both of them walking the perimeter with lanterns and cudgels. "Have you ever actually fought raiders?" he asked as they walked. "Twice. They mostly run if you make it clear you will fight back. They want easy targets. What if they do not run? Then you hit them until they do or until they cannot." She said it matter-of-factly without bravado. "You make it sound simple." "It is simple. Not easy, but simple. You protect what is yours." They completed the watch without incident, but 3 nights later a homestead half a mile from the settlement was hit. The family woke to find their sheep pen broken open, 2 animals gone. The tracks led north into the hills. Garrett called a meeting in the hall. We need to make it clear this will not be tolerated. A group will go into the hills tomorrow, track them down, make them understand Crest Hollow is not easy prey. That could start a war, someone said, or it could end the raids. If they know we will come for them, they will move on to softer targets. Rowan glanced at Elara. She was watching Garrett with a thoughtful expression. I want volunteers, Garrett continued. People who can handle themselves. We will leave at dawn. Elara's hand found Rowan's under the table. She squeezed once, a warning or a reassurance. That evening they sat on the steps of her cabin, watching the stars emerge. You should not go tomorrow, she said. I have to. I am part of this settlement. You have been here 2 months. No one expects you to risk yourself. You will go. That is different. How? She looked at him, frustrated. Because I have done this before. Because I know what I am doing. You have been training me for weeks. Do you think I learned nothing? Training is not the same as real fighting. Then I will stay behind you and learn by watching. Rowan, Elara, he took her hand. I am not letting you go into danger without me. That is not negotiable, she sighed. You are stubborn. I am determined. You said so yourself. She leaned her head on his shoulder. If something happens to you, I will be very angry. Then we should both make sure nothing happens. The group that gathered at dawn was 8 strong, Garrett in the lead, Elara and Rowan near the middle. They moved north into the hills, following the tracks from the raid. The terrain grew rougher, the trees thicker. They walked for 3 hours before Elara, who had been scouting ahead, returned with news. There is a camp ahead. 2 men, maybe 3. They have a small fire, probably cooking one of the stolen sheep. Garrett nodded. We will surround them, make it clear they are outnumbered. With luck, they will surrender without a fight. They spread out, approaching the camp from multiple angles. Rowan's heart was pounding, his mouth dry. He gripped the cudgel Elara had given him, trying to remember everything she had taught him. Stay low. Watch your center. Do not hesitate. The raiders were indeed cooking sheep, the smell of roasting meat thick in the air. There were 2 of them visible, both human, both rough-looking men in worn leather and homespun. A third was probably in the tent behind them. Garrett stepped into the clearing, cudgel raised. You took livestock from Crest Hollow. That was a mistake. The raiders jumped up, grabbing weapons. For a moment everyone stood frozen, and Rowan thought maybe this would end peacefully after all. Then one of the raiders threw a knife. It spun end over end toward Garrett, who barely managed to dodge. The clearing erupted into motion. The third raider burst from the tent with a rusty sword. The settlement group rushed forward. Rowan moved with them, his training taking over even as his conscious mind struggled to process what was happening. One of the raiders broke away, running toward the trees, running directly toward Rowan. The man was larger than Rowan, heavier, with a scarred face and wild eyes. He swung a club in a wide arc. Rowan remembered Elara's lessons, dropped his center, and stepped inside the swing. The club whistled over his shoulder. He drove forward, using his weight, and felt the impact as they both went down. They hit the ground hard. The raider was on top, hands reaching for Rowan's throat. Rowan twisted, broke the grip the way Elara had taught him, used his hip for leverage. Suddenly he was on top, his knee on the man's chest, his cudgel raised. The raider went still, breathing hard. Do not. Drop your weapon. The man let his club fall. Around them the fight was ending. The other 2 raiders were on the ground, disarmed, Garrett and the others standing over them. Elara appeared at Rowan's side, her face smudged with dirt but unharmed. You did well, she said quietly. His hands were shaking. I remembered what you taught me. I can see that. They bound the raiders and marched them back to Crest Hollow. The settlement's justice was swift and pragmatic. The 3 men were given a choice: work off their theft through labor at the mill, or leave the territory and not return. They chose labor. The stolen sheep were returned. That evening Rowan sat on the steps of Elara's cabin, the adrenaline finally fading, leaving him exhausted and strange. Elara sat beside him, cleaning the dirt from beneath her nails. "You were right," he said. "Training is not the same as real fighting. But it helped. It did. Everything you taught me worked. When that man came at me, I just reacted. My body knew what to do." She took his hand, examining his scraped knuckles. "You have bruises forming. You would know what that looks like." She smiled. "I would. I have given you enough of them." Was that really what the training was about? Keeping me safe? She was quiet for a moment. "At first, yes. I heard you were new, alone, likely to get yourself hurt if the raiders came. I thought I could help. But then you kept showing up every morning, no matter how many times I put you on your back. And you looked at me like I was not a monster or a curiosity, just a person. So I kept inventing new pins and holds, anything to make you keep coming back. You never had to invent excuses. I would have kept coming regardless. I know that now." She threaded her fingers through his. "But I did not know it then. What do we do now?" "What do you mean?" "The raiders are dealt with. I do not need training anymore, so what happens to our mornings?" She turned to face him, her expression serious. "Do you want them to end?" "No, absolutely not." "Then we find other things to do at dawn. We watch the sunrise. We make breakfast together. We do whatever people do when they are not pretending that wrestling is the only way they can touch each other. I like wrestling." "I like it too. But I also like you, Rowan. Not just the excuse to be near you, but you." He kissed her, slow and deliberate, there on the steps with the stars coming out overhead. When they broke apart, she was smiling. "I like you too," he said. In case that was not clear. It was reasonably clear. Over the following weeks, the settlement prepared for winter. Rowan helped repair roofs and reinforce walls, storing up his earnings and his supplies. He spent most evenings at Elara's cabin, sometimes cooking dinner together, sometimes just sitting by the fire. They did still train occasionally, but now it was playful, an excuse to tumble around on the floor laughing rather than any serious attempt at instruction. "You are getting soft," she teased one morning, pinning him easily. "I am strategically allowing you to win so you do not get bored." "That is a convenient excuse for losing." "It is a true excuse." She leaned down and kissed him. "I would never get bored with you." The first snow came in late autumn, soft and tentative. Rowan woke in Elara's cabin, her body warm against his, the world outside muffled and white. He lay there for a while, watching her sleep, feeling something settle deep in his chest. This was what he had come to the frontier to find. Not just freedom from expectations, but the chance to build something real with someone who chose him for himself. When she woke, she found him watching her and smiled. "What?" "Nothing, just thinking. About how glad I am that Garrett sent me to talk to you." "Me too." She stretched cat-like. "Are we training this morning?" "Do you want to?" "Not particularly." "I want to stay here where it is warm." "That is an excellent plan." They stayed in bed as the snow fell outside, talking about the future, about what they would build when spring came. Elara wanted to expand her garden, maybe raise goats. Rowan wanted to build a proper workshop, take on apprentices eventually. They talked about these things as if the other person would obviously be part of those plans, and neither of them questioned it. As winter settled in properly, the settlement turned inward, people spending more time in their homes and the communal hall, less time on the roads and fields. Rowan and Elara became a fixture together, and if some people still whispered, most had accepted them. Garrett seemed particularly pleased, as if he had orchestrated the entire thing. "You did orchestrate it," Rowan told him one evening over ale. "You sent me to her." "I sent you for training. The rest was up to you too, still. Thank you." Garrett raised his mug, build a good life here. That is thanks enough. In the deepest part of winter, when the snow was thick and the nights were long, Rowan asked Elara if she would consider making their arrangement permanent. They were sitting by her fire, his arm around her shoulders, her head on his chest. "What does permanent mean?" she asked. "It means I want to build a life with you, not just spend time together, but actually plan a future, a shared future. We have been doing that already, I know, but I want to say it out loud, make it real." She lifted her head to look at him. "Are you asking me to marry you?" "I suppose I am, yes, though I am doing it very poorly." "You are doing it fine." She was smiling. "Ask me properly." He shifted so he could face her, taking both her hands. "Elara Ashford, will you marry me? Will you let me be part of your life, officially and permanently? Will you put up with me building furniture at odd hours and likely injuring myself with tools on a regular basis?" "Yes," she said, still smiling, "on one condition. Anything. You have to let me keep pinning you during training." "That is not a condition. That is a benefit." She kissed him, and the winter cold seemed very far away. They married in early spring when the snow was melting and the first flowers were pushing through the earth. It was a simple ceremony in the communal hall, Garrett officiating, most of the settlement in attendance. Rowan wore his best shirt and Elara wore a dress she had sewn herself, pale green like new leaves. They spoke their vows clearly, promising to care for each other, to build together, to face whatever came with honesty and partnership. When Garrett declared them married, Elara pulled Rowan into a kiss that made several people whistle and cheer. He did not care. He wrapped his arms around his wife and kissed her back, feeling like he had finally found the place he was supposed to be. They spent the first week of their marriage building an addition onto Elara's cabin, expanding it to include a workshop for Rowan. He did most of the construction while she worked on the garden, preparing the soil for planting. In the evenings, they would collapse together on their bed, exhausted and happy, talking about what they would plant, what furniture they needed, how many chickens they might reasonably keep. "We could get goats in the summer," Elara said one night. "How many goats?" "4. Maybe 6. "That is a lot of goats. I like goats. They are clever. They are troublemakers. Then they will fit right in." She grinned at him. "Are you opposed to goats?" "I am not opposed, just concerned about the amount of trouble 6 clever goats might cause. We will start with 4. "That is a good compromise." Spring turned to summer, the settlement coming alive with growth and activity. Rowan's workshop became functional, and he began taking on bigger projects, building a new storage shed for the trading post, crafting a fancy set of chairs for a wealthy homesteader. Elara's garden flourished, producing more vegetables than they could eat. She traded the surplus for other goods, building relationships and a reputation as someone reliable. They fell into routines, the comfortable patterns of a shared life. Morning coffee together while the sun rose. Work during the day, often separate but always aware of each other. Evenings on the porch, talking or reading or simply sitting in companionable silence. And occasionally, when the mood struck them, they would clear space in the workshop or the front room and Elara would teach Rowan a new hold or technique. Both of them laughing as they tumbled around, the training now entirely an excuse to touch each other. "You are getting better," she told him one evening after he successfully reversed one of her pins. I have been training with you for almost a year." "Has it been that long?" "Nearly." He kissed her collarbone, her throat, her jaw. "Best year of my life." "Mine too." In late summer, the settlement held a harvest festival, even though the actual harvest was still weeks away. It was an excuse to celebrate, to dance and drink and feast on the bounty of the growing season. A great bonfire was built in the center of the common area, and people gathered around it as the sun set, passing bottles and sharing food. Rowan and Elara sat together on a blanket near the fire, watching the flames dance. Garrett sat down beside them, slightly drunk, grinning widely. "Look at you two," he said. "I knew you would be good together." "You keep saying that," Rowan said, "but I remember you just told me to talk to her about training." "I know what I was doing." Garrett winked. "You think it was coincidence I sent the new soft-spoken man to train with the prettiest woman in the settlement?" Elara rolled her eyes. "You are taking credit for our entire relationship now." "I am taking credit for the introduction. The rest was your doing." "That is fair," Rowan admitted. As the night wore on and the fire burned down to coals, people began to drift away to their homes. Elara pulled Rowan to his feet. "Come on, I want to teach you something. Now, here, one last technique, then we can go home." They walked a short distance from the fire to a patch of soft grass. The moon was bright overhead, casting silver light across the meadow. It reminded Rowan of that first morning when he had looked up at the dawn sky and wondered how he had ended up on his back. "What are you teaching me?" he asked. "A very advanced hold." She moved behind him, wrapping her arms around his waist. "It is called the commitment hold. I do not think that is a real technique. It is absolutely real. Here I will demonstrate." She tightened her arms, then shifted her weight and pulled him backward. They tumbled together into the grass, rolling until he was on his back and she was lying across him, propped on her elbows. "See," she said, "inescapable." "Is that so? Completely inescapable?" He wrapped his arms around her, pulling her closer. "I suppose I am trapped then." "You suppose correctly. What do I do now? Now you accept your fate." She kissed him, soft and slow, the grass cool beneath them and the stars bright overhead. "I can live with that fate," he said when they broke apart. "Good, because you are stuck with me." "Best thing I ever got stuck with." They lay there for a while, holding each other in the moonlight, the settlement quiet around them. Rowan thought about the morning Garrett had sent him to find Elara, about how nervous he had been, how uncertain. He thought about all the mornings after, the bruises and laughter and slowly building trust. He thought about the moment in the cabin when she had admitted the pinning was mostly an excuse, and the relief he had felt knowing he was not the only one inventing reasons to keep training. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For throwing me to the ground repeatedly until I figured out I was in love with you." She laughed, the sound warm and genuine. "You are welcome. Thank you for being terrible at escaping holds." "I was not terrible. I was strategically unsuccessful." "That is one way to phrase it." He pulled her down into another kiss, deeper this time, unhurried. When they finally stood and walked back to their cabin hand in hand, the fire behind them had burned down to glowing embers, and the settlement was dark and peaceful. Inside their home, they built up their own fire and sat together on the floor in front of it, Elara leaning back against Rowan's chest, his arms around her waist. "We should keep training," she said quietly. "Should we?" "Not because you need it, just because I like it. Having that time with you in the mornings. I like it too." He kissed the top of her head. "Though I think we can both admit the training is secondary at this point. Fine. We will call it morning wrestling and stop pretending it is educational. Perfect." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the flames. Outside, the summer night was warm and full of cricket song. Inside, everything felt settled and right, like pieces of a puzzle finally clicking into place. "You ever regret it?" Elara asked softly. "Leaving your old life? Your family wanted specific things from you, and you chose something completely different." "Never," he said without hesitation. "Not even for a moment. They wanted me to fit into their plan. You let me figure out my own plan, and then you chose to be part of it. That is not even comparable." "Good." She relaxed against him. "I just wanted to make sure. Are you having regrets?" "No, just making sure you were not." He tightened his arms around her. My only regret is that I did not come here sooner, but I suppose I had to get here when I did, or the timing would not have worked. Garrett would have sent someone else to train with me, and they would have fallen in love with you instead, and I would have missed my chance. Maybe, or maybe I would have just trained them efficiently and sent them on their way because they were not you. I like that version better. Me too. As summer faded into autumn and the settlement prepared for another harvest, Rowan and Elara continued their morning routines. They trained, they wrestled, they laughed and pinned each other to the floor and pretended it was still about self-defense. They worked side by side on the expansion of their garden, building raised beds and a small greenhouse. They acquired 4 goats, which were indeed clever troublemakers, and Elara was delighted by them. The settlement continued to grow, new families arriving, new structures being built. Rowan's carpentry business flourished, and Elara's garden produced enough surplus that she could trade for luxuries they had not previously been able to afford. They were building a real life together, something solid and lasting. On a cool morning in late autumn, almost exactly a year after that first lesson in the meadow, they stood together in their front room, the furniture pushed aside, the space cleared for training. Elara demonstrated a new technique, something complicated involving leverage and timing. Rowan tried to follow along but got distracted by the way the morning light caught in her hair. "You are not paying attention," she said, exasperated. "I am paying attention, just not to the hold. What are you paying attention to?" "You," she smiled despite herself. "That is not helpful for learning. I have learned plenty. Maybe I am ready to graduate from your training program." "Never." She rushed him, quick as a striking snake, and took him to the ground. They landed in a tangle of limbs, both of them laughing. "You will train with me forever." "Is that a threat?" "It is a promise." He rolled them over so he was on top, pinning her wrists gently above her head. "I can live with that promise." "Good." She lifted her head and kissed him, "because you are stuck with it." They stayed there on the floor, the morning light streaming through the windows, the world outside quiet and peaceful. Somewhere in the distance, a rooster crowed. The goats were probably causing trouble in the garden. There was work to be done, projects to complete, a whole day ahead of them. But for now, they were exactly where they wanted to be, holding each other in the space they had cleared for wrestling and love and whatever came next. The frontier had promised them the chance to build their own futures, and they had done exactly that. Together. "I love you," Rowan said, because it felt important to say out loud. "I love you too," Elara replied. "Now let me up so we can actually train." "No, no, I think I am winning right now. I want to enjoy it." She laughed and stopped struggling, relaxing beneath him. "Fine. You can win this round. Thank you. But tomorrow I am pinning you twice as much to make up for it. I expect nothing less." They stayed there a moment longer, then Rowan released her and helped her up. They actually did train that morning, working through holds and counters, pushing each other, testing balance and strength. But there was laughter throughout, and frequent pauses for kissing, and neither of them took it too seriously anymore. The training had served its purpose, bringing them together, giving them an excuse until they did not need excuses anymore. When they finally finished and sat down to breakfast, both of them sweaty and happy, Rowan looked across the table at his wife and felt the deep satisfaction of a life well chosen. "What are you thinking?" Elara asked, biting into a slice of bread. "That I am glad you agreed to train me." "Me too." She reached across the table and took his hand. "Best decision I ever made, teaching me to fight." "No, teaching you badly so you would keep coming back," he laughed. "You are not teaching me badly. I actually can defend myself now. You can. But admit it, you stopped trying very hard after the first week." "I will admit no such thing." He squeezed her hand. I was always trying very hard, just maybe not always to escape. Exactly my point. They finished breakfast and cleaned up together, moving around each other with the easy coordination of people who had learned each other's rhythms. Then they went out to start the day's work, Rowan to his workshop and Elara to her garden. But they worked within sight of each other, close enough to call out comments or jokes, close enough to feel the presence that had become essential to both of them. At midday, they broke for lunch and sat together on the porch, sharing bread and cheese and watching the settlement go about its business. People passed by, calling greetings, stopping occasionally to chat. The world was busy and full of life, and they were part of it. "We should plan a trip," Elara said suddenly. "A trip where, I do not know, somewhere we have not been, maybe to the eastern settlements, see what they are like. When? Spring, maybe, after the planting is done." "That sounds good." He liked the idea of traveling with her, seeing new places, then coming back to the home they had built. "We could visit your family." "You would want to do that, of course. They are your family." She smiled, pleased. "They would like you." "My mother will think you are too skinny and try to feed you constantly." "I can handle that." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, planning trips they might take, things they might build, the shape their life might take in the years ahead. Everything felt possible and open, the future something they could craft together however they chose. As the sun moved toward the western horizon, and the work day wound down, Rowan returned to the porch to find Elara tending to the goats, which had indeed gotten into trouble and needed to be herded back into their pen. He helped her corner the most stubborn one, a spotted troublemaker named Jasper, and between the two of them they managed to restore order. "I told you goats were trouble," he said, latching the pen. "They are spirited," Elara corrected. "It is different, if you say so." That evening they cooked dinner together, a stew made from vegetables from Elara's garden and meat from the trading post. They ate on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and gold. When the stars came out, they stayed there, wrapped in a blanket, talking about nothing important and everything important at once. "You think we will have children?" Elara asked at one point. "You want children? Someday, maybe. Not yet, but someday." "Then someday we probably will." He kissed her temple. "We have time to decide." "Yes, we have time." They sat together as the night deepened, the settlement growing quiet around them, lights going out in windows one by one. Eventually they went inside and banked the fire and climbed into bed, holding each other in the darkness. "Thank you for today," Elara murmured, half asleep. "It was just a normal day, exactly." He smiled against her hair, understanding. Normal days were a gift, the foundation of a life well lived. The dramatic moments mattered, but it was the quiet accumulation of mornings and evenings, work and rest, laughter and simple companionship that actually built something lasting. "Thank you for every day," he said. But she was already asleep, her breathing deep and even, her body warm against his. He held her and listened to the night sounds through the window, the distant call of an owl, the rustle of wind in the trees. Tomorrow would bring more work, more small challenges and small joys. They would train in the morning, probably, or maybe they would just stay in bed and watch the sunrise. Either way, they would be together, which was the point of everything. Rowan closed his eyes and let sleep take him, grateful for the path that had led him here, grateful for the orc woman who had thrown him to the ground repeatedly, until they both admitted they were in love, grateful for this life they were building one day at a time. Outside, the frontier stretched away into darkness, full of possibility and challenge and all the elements that made life worth living. But inside their cabin, everything was safe and warm and exactly where it needed to be. The next morning they woke early and went outside to watch the dawn, standing together on the porch with mugs of coffee, the world emerging from darkness into light. The meadow where they had first trained was visible from the porch, the grass silvered with dew, and Rowan remembered that first morning when he had looked up at the sky and wondered how he had ended up on his back. Now he knew. It had not been about falling down. It had been about finding someone worth getting back up for, someone worth showing up for every morning, someone worth building a life with. "Should we train today?" Elara asked, leaning against him. "If you want. I always want, but we do not have to. How about a compromise? We train for a little while, then we spend the rest of the morning doing something else." "What's something else?" "We could work on that shed you wanted for the goats, or we could just sit here and finish our coffee. Whatever you prefer." She considered, then smiled. "Let us train first. I have a new technique I want to show you." "Of course you do." They went to the front room and cleared space, settling into the familiar rhythm of warm-ups and stretches. Then Elara demonstrated the new hold, which involved a complicated leg sweep and a twist that left Rowan thoroughly confused. "I am never going to remember all that," he said. "You will. Try it." He tried. He failed spectacularly, ending up in a heap on the floor. Elara helped him up and they tried again and again. By the 10th attempt, he was starting to understand the mechanics, and by the 15th he actually succeeded, sweeping Elara's legs and controlling the fall so they both landed safely. "Good," she said, looking up at him from the floor. "You are learning. I have a good teacher. You do." She pulled him down into a kiss, then pushed him off and stood up, offering a hand. Again. They trained until mid-morning, both of them sweaty and tired and happy. Then they cleaned up and had a proper breakfast, and Rowan spent the afternoon working on the goat shed, while Elara harvested the last of the summer vegetables and prepared them for storage. The days continued like that, settling into a rhythm that felt sustainable and good. They worked hard, they rested, they spent time together and time apart, they trained and laughed and built the life they had chosen. The settlement around them continued to grow and change, new people arriving, old friends deepening, the community becoming more established and secure. Autumn gave way to winter, and they spent the cold months close to the fire, working on indoor projects and planning for spring. Elara taught Rowan how to preserve vegetables properly, and he taught her some basic carpentry so she could help with repairs around the homestead. They were building not just a home but a partnership, learning each other's skills, compensating for each other's weaknesses, amplifying each other's strengths. When spring came again, marking a full year since their marriage, they did take that trip to the eastern settlements. It was a journey of 2 weeks, most of it on foot with their packs on their backs, following roads that were barely more than paths. They visited Elara's family, who did indeed think Rowan was too skinny and fed him until he could barely move. Her parents were kind, her siblings curious, and everyone seemed genuinely happy that Elara had found someone. "You are good for her," her mother told Rowan one evening while they were cleaning up after dinner. "She smiles more. She is good for me too. I can see that. You look at her like she hung the stars. I look at her like she is the best thing that ever happened to me, which she is," her mother smiled. "Take care of each other. That is all that matters." They returned to Crest Hollow at the end of the 2 weeks, tired from travel but glad to be home. The settlement felt even more like home after having been away, and they settled back into their routines with relief and satisfaction. "I like traveling," Elara said one evening, "but I like being here more." "Me too. Though we should do it again sometime." "Agreed, just not for a while." That summer was particularly good, the weather mild and the harvest abundant. Rowan's workshop stayed busy, and Elara expanded the garden even further, hiring one of the settlement youths to help with the heavier work. They talked more seriously about children, agreeing that maybe next year they would be ready but not pushing it. "We will know when the time is right," Elara said, and Rowan agreed. The autumn harvest festival that year was even larger than the previous one, the settlement celebrating a successful year and a growing population. Rowan and Elara attended as they always did, sitting near the bonfire with friends and neighbors, sharing food and stories. At one point Garrett stood up and called for attention, raising his mug. "I want to make a toast," he announced, "to Crest Hollow, to all of us who chose to make a life here on the frontier, to the work we have done and the work yet to come, and especially to the newcomers who have become part of our community." He looked directly at Rowan. "Some of you arrived not knowing how to defend yourselves, and we taught you. Some of you arrived alone and you found family. This is what we do here. We build together. To Crest Hollow." "To Crest Hollow," everyone echoed, raising their drinks. Rowan raised his mug and drank, feeling the warmth of the ale and the fire and the community surrounding him. He glanced at Elara, who was smiling, her face lit by the flames, and felt the now familiar surge of gratitude for the path that had brought him here. Later that night, after the fire had burned down and people had drifted home, Rowan and Elara walked back to their cabin under a sky brilliant with stars. They did not speak much, comfortable in silence, hands linked. Inside, they prepared for bed, moving around each other with the practiced ease of 2 years together. When they finally settled under the blankets, Elara turned to face him. "This has been a good year," she said. "It has. Do you think next year will be as good? I think it will be different." "But yes, I think it will be good." She smiled and kissed him soft and slow. "I love you. I love you too." They fell asleep tangled together, warm and safe, the future stretching out ahead of them full of possibility. The next morning they woke at dawn, as they always did, and went to the front room to train. Elara taught Rowan a variation on a hold they had practiced before, something to do with weight distribution and timing. He tried to focus but kept getting distracted by the way the early light caught in her eyes. "You are not paying attention again," she said. "I am always paying attention, just not always to the fighting. What are you paying attention to? You, always you." She smiled and tackled him, both of them laughing as they hit the floor. They wrestled for a while, neither trying very hard to win, just enjoying the contact and the movement. Eventually, they ended with Rowan on his back and Elara pinning his shoulders, exactly as they had ended up that very first morning in the meadow. "I have you," she said, grinning down at him. "You do. Are you going to try to escape?" "No." "Why not?" "Because I like where I am." She leaned down and kissed him, and in that moment everything felt perfect and complete. The training that had brought them together, the trust they had built, the life they were creating day by day. All of it had started with a simple offer to teach him to defend himself, and had grown into something neither of them could have predicted but both of them treasured. "I am glad I trained you," Elara murmured against his lips. "I am glad you did too. Even though we both know the training was mostly an excuse. Mostly, not entirely. You did teach me to defend myself. I did. And you learned well." She sat up, still straddling him, looking down with affection clear in her face. "But yes, the pinning was mostly an excuse to be near you." Best excuse I ever heard. They stayed there a moment longer, then Elara released him and they stood, brushing off and preparing to face the day. There was work to do, always work to do on the frontier. But first, there was breakfast together, and coffee on the porch watching the settlement wake up, and all the small rituals that made their life together feel solid and real. As they ate, Rowan thought about the man he had been when he arrived at Crest Hollow, uncertain and formal, and trying to figure out who he was when no one was telling him. He thought about that first morning in the meadow, looking up at the sky in confusion while an orc woman he barely knew smiled down at him. He thought about all the mornings after, the slow building of trust and affection, the moment when they had both stopped pretending and admitted what was growing between them. "What are you thinking about?" Elara asked, watching him. "About how lucky I am." "Lucky how?" "Lucky that Garrett sent me to you. Lucky that you agreed to train me. Lucky that I was too stubborn to give up even when you kept putting me on the ground." "You were not stubborn. You were determined. Same thing. Not quite." She reached across the table and took his hand. "Stubborn is refusing to change. Determined is refusing to quit. You were determined. Thank you." "For what?" "For seeing the difference." They finished breakfast and went about their day, working side by side when they could, calling out to each other across the homestead when they could not. The sun tracked across the sky, marking the hours, and the settlement buzzed with activity around them. That evening they sat on the porch again, as they did most evenings, watching the sunset and talking about their plans. They would expand the workshop in the spring, Rowan decided. Elara wanted to try growing herbs to sell to the healers. They would need to repair the goat pen before winter. Small plans, achievable goals, the building blocks of a shared life. "Do you ever wonder what your life would be like if you had stayed in the South?" Elara asked. "Sometimes. But it is not a life I recognize anymore. That person, the one who did everything his family expected, he feels like someone else." "Do you miss him?" "No, he was unhappy, he just did not realize it yet. And now I am happy, very happy." He pulled her closer. "You, the same. I was fine before you arrived, but fine is not the same as happy. Now I am both." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge one by one. Somewhere in the settlement a dog barked. The goats rustled in their pen. The world was full of small sounds and small movements, all of it adding up to the texture of a life well lived. Later, in bed, Elara turned to him with a thoughtful expression. "Do you think we have become boring?" "Boring how?" "We have a routine. We do the same things most days." "Some people would call that boring." "Some people are idiots." He kissed her forehead. "Boring is the wrong word. Stable maybe, contented, but not boring. You do not find it dull." "Never." "How could I find you dull?" She smiled, reassured. "Good, because I like our routine. I like knowing you will be there every morning. I like that we have built something predictable and safe." "Me too." They fell asleep holding each other, and Rowan dreamed of meadows and morning light, of being pinned to the grass while someone he loved smiled down at him. When he woke the next morning, the dream and reality blended together seamlessly, and he could not tell which was which. The years passed in a steady rhythm, each one building on the last. They did have children eventually, 2 of them, a boy named Xander and a girl named Alina, both of whom inherited their mother's quick reflexes and their father's quiet determination. Rowan taught them carpentry and Elara taught them to grow things. And together, they raised 2 humans who were comfortable in the frontier world, who saw orcs and humans as simply people, who understood that family was built through choice and effort as much as through blood. But all of that was still years away on the morning when Rowan woke up in the cabin he shared with Elara, the woman who had trained him supposedly for his safety, but really just to have an excuse to touch him. He got up quietly, not wanting to wake her, and went to the porch to watch the sunrise. The meadow where they had first trained was visible from here, the grass silvered with morning dew, exactly as it had been that first day. He thought about the man he had been then, nervous and formal and hoping desperately not to make a fool of himself. He thought about Elara demonstrating holds and pins, always with that edge of playfulness, always holding him just a little longer than necessary. "You are up early," Elara said from the doorway, wrapped in a blanket. "Could not sleep." "Why not? Just thinking." She came to stand beside him, leaning against his shoulder. "About what?" "About how you used to pin me to the ground every morning." "Used to, I still do that." "Fair point. But back then we were pretending it was about training." "It was about training, partially. Very partially." She smiled. "Are you complaining?" "Never." He wrapped his arm around her. "I am just grateful for what, for you, for this, for everything we have built together." She turned and kissed him, slow and thorough, there on the porch with the dawn breaking around them. When she pulled back, she was smiling, her eyes warm. "I am grateful too," she said, "for the soft-spoken carpenter who kept showing up every morning even though I kept throwing him to the ground. He did not mind being thrown, I noticed." They stood together watching the sun rise, the frontier spreading out before them full of light and possibility. Behind them was the cabin they had built together, the life they had chosen, the future they were creating day by day. Ahead was another day of work and rest, of small challenges and small joys of being together. "Should we train this morning?" Elara asked. "Always." They went inside and cleared space in the front room as they had done hundreds of times before. Elara demonstrated a new technique, something involving a quick turn and a hip throw. Rowan tried to follow along, succeeded partially, failed mostly, ended up on his back looking up at the ceiling. Elara appeared above him, grinning, her hands on his shoulders. "You are getting worse, not better. I am strategically allowing you to win so you do not get bored." "That is still your excuse." "It is a good excuse." She leaned down and kissed him. "It is a terrible excuse, but I will allow it. Thank you." She stayed there, pinning him gently, both of them knowing he could escape if he really tried and neither of them caring. This was what they did. This was who they were. Two people who had found each other through the excuse of training and built something real through honesty and effort and daily choice. "I love you," Rowan said, because it felt important to say. "I love you too. Now try to escape so I can pin you again." He tried. He failed. They both laughed. And outside the sun continued to rise over Crest Hollow, marking the beginning of another day, another chance to build something good together. Another morning spent on the floor in a tangle of limbs and laughter and love that had started with a simple offer to train him for his safety, but had grown into something infinitely more valuable. The story of how they came together was simple in the telling. An orc woman offered to teach a human man to defend himself. They met at dawn in a meadow. She threw him to the ground repeatedly. Eventually they admitted they were in love. They built a life together. But the living of it was infinitely complex and infinitely rich, full of small moments and quiet joys, of daily choices to show up for each other, to work together, to create something that honored both of them. It was not a story of grand gestures or dramatic rescues. It was a story of consistent presence, of learning to trust, of finding someone worth falling for in every sense of the phrase. And if that story happened to involve a lot of wrestling and pinning, well, that just made it better. Some of the best things in life started with being flat on your back, looking up at the sky, wondering how you got there and grateful for the journey. Rowan got up off the floor eventually, as he always did. Elara helped him up, as she always did. They finished training and moved on to the rest of their day, as they always did. And the life they were building together continued, steady and strong, built on a foundation of mornings spent learning to fall and get back up again, of trust earned through repetition and proof, of love that had started as an excuse and grown into something real. That evening, after the work was done and dinner was eaten and they were sitting on the porch watching the stars emerge, Elara leaned her head on Rowan's shoulder and sighed contentedly. "Good day," he asked. "Very good day. You, the best." They sat in comfortable silence, the frontier night settling around them, full of crickets' song and rustling leaves and all the sounds of a world at peace. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new work, new opportunities to learn and grow together. But tonight was for rest, for being present, for appreciating what they had built. "Thank you for training with me today," Elara said softly. "Thank you for teaching me. I will teach you tomorrow too. I know I will be there. I know you will." And in that knowledge, that certainty of showing up for each other day after day, was the real foundation of what they had built. Not grand romance or dramatic gestures, but simple, consistent presence. Choosing each other every morning, being willing to fall and help each other back up. Building something solid one day, one lesson, one pin at a time. The story of Rowan and Elara was not particularly dramatic in its elements, but in its living, in the daily practice of love and partnership, it was as rich and complex as any story ever told. And on the frontier, where people built their own futures with their own hands, that was exactly the kind of story worth living. They sat together on the porch until the stars were fully out, brilliant and countless overhead. Then they went inside, banked the fire, and went to bed, holding each other in the darkness. Tomorrow would come with its own rhythm, its own challenges and joys. But tonight they rested, grateful for what they had and confident in what they were building. In the morning they would train again. Elara would pin Rowan to the floor, probably multiple times. He would pretend to try to escape and fail in ways that were increasingly obviously intentional. They would laugh and kiss, and eventually get up to face the day's work. And the life they had chosen together would continue, rich with small moments and quiet satisfaction, built on the foundation of showing up for each other every single dawn. That was the story. Not of how they fell in love, though they did. Not of how they overcame great obstacles, though they faced their share. But of how they built something lasting through consistency and choice, through being willing to be vulnerable with each other, through finding joy in daily routine and shared purpose. And if someone asked them years later how they came to be together, they would smile and say simply, "She trained him at dawn, supposedly for his safety, but really the lessons were mostly just an excuse. He kept showing up. Eventually they stopped pretending. And they built a life together that honored both of them, one morning, one fall, one choice at a time." The end of the story was not dramatic. It was simply the continuation of what they had started, day after day, year after year, building something good through patience and effort and love. And in that continuation, that steady building, was all the happiness anyone could ask for.